Yo, what's poppin' everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over the top 10 best decks in the Shrouded Fable format. Yep, that's the same format that Worlds is going to be held in. And of course, there's going to be some interesting deck lists, some changes to some top archetypes, and maybe even some new entrants. We'll have to find out. Let me know what your top 10 best decks are, or what you think they're going to be in this format, and we'll find out. I've taken a lot of inspiration from the Pokeca Book website that's been updating everyone on the Japanese metagame. I've changed it up a little bit, of course doing my own spin on my own list, because a lot of the lists here are my own homebrewed lists, and we'll have to see how it goes. That being said, like this video, share, subscribe, and let's jump into our top 10 best decks. Kicking off our list is going to be Snorlax. Now, Snorlax isn't necessarily a deck that you'd see on any of the Japanese metagame tier lists right now, and I largely think that's due to them playing a best of one format, and I even believe their time is 20 minutes best of one instead of 30 minutes best of one. If anyone knows about the Japanese metagame, let me know in the comments below. Other than that, I think Snorlax is a fine call for best of 3, especially when we add in Cornerstone Ogerpon EX, which can counter a lot of the top decks in formats by using its ability to block them from attacking, kind of where our second Mimikyu would be. I take that a step further by attacking with it, with fighting energies, double turbo energies, so we can kind of wall off the Pokemon that can attack through the Cornerstone, and of course we can Lost City them away. Snorlax is going to be the same strategy as always, where we're using block in combination with counter catcher and boss's orders to bring up Pokemon that your opponent don't necessarily want in active. Maybe they could play Professor Turo, maybe they'll play Switch, but our goal is to continuously bring them back over and over and over again. To me, this is a pretty solid list. I've played it myself to a tournament where I play second. Not the biggest tournament, but there was a lot of big name players from the Shuffle Squad in that said tournament. This is my updated list from that, so hopefully you enjoy it. If you're missing any of the cards for any of the decks in this video, be sure to check out our sponsors at Kayfabe Cards for physical cards, our PTCGL store for any of your digital cards that you want to get online with code cards, or check out the TSS website that has some singles available as well. All those links are available in our description, and if you're looking to copy and paste these, listen to any of the tabletop simulators, because these are not available on PTCG Live right now. Be sure to copy and paste them from the pinned comment in the comment section below. Might not be up right away, but we usually put it up within 24 hours of the video being up. That being said, let's jump into our number 9 pick. Coming in hot at number 9 is going to be Dialga VSTAR. Now, these last few spots on this list in Japan are really tossed up between Goldango, Roaring Moon EX, Dialga. There might be one that I'm forgetting here, but regardless, it's one of those things where Dialga is really crushing it right now, and I think in a similar position where the deck was at Indianapolis Regionals, where Andrew Hedrick actually won the event with Dialga. A lot of these stage 2 decks cannot deal with Dialga's devastating turns where you're like, knock out something, take another turn, knock out something huge again, play Iono, right? And I think that Pheasantipede is a solid add to this deck, where we're able to draw 3 cards after a knockout. Our strategy is always going to be using Metang to accelerate energies onto our Origin form Dialga VSTAR, using that Chrono VSTAR attack to draw or to take an extra turn and really have a devastating punch with Dialga's other attack. We could always attack through with things like Mew EX, and of course, just having some very interesting options. We didn't really gain anything new beyond the Pheasantipede. I could see a world where Night Stretcher gets added into this deck, but we have a solid tried and true list that won a regionals. We could basically substitute the Zamazenta for the Pheasantipede, also giving us an opportunity to snipe for 100 damage if we really want to. And beyond that, I mean, Dialga is a ton of fun. Who does not like loading up 15 energies to their Dialga and going crazy? To me, I feel like this list is probably fine for number 9, whereas I don't necessarily see Roaring Moon or Goldango or any of the other kind of decks that are really going the extra mile. I could be wrong. Let me know if you're fighting for any of those decks, or if there's any other decks that you think could be on this list. But this is what we got going on at number 9. Let's see what we got going on at number 8 up next. Moving on to number 8, we have Lost Zone Box, another deck proven by Andrew Hedrick, and it's one of those things where I'm like, you wanna know what? You gotta go with one of the GOATs, right? He's kind of come up over the past couple of years, become absolutely one of the best players in the game, has come up with some banger deck lists, so why not really go with those styles of deck lists? And I think Lost Zone Box, while we're all a little bit afraid of the new Kyurem, and for anyone who's new joining in here, Kyurem's coming out in Shrouded Fable. It's normally a 5 energy attack to do 1/10 to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon, but if your opponent's played any card in their discard pile with the name Colress, you can use that attack for 1 energy. You pitch all energies, and it's one of those things where if your opponent's turn 2 using Kyurem going 110, 110, 110, knocking out Comfey, Cramorant, you're probably in for a rude awakening. And in this case, I think they even play Canceling Cologne sometimes to get around Manaphy, so that could be something difficult to deal with. Now, Lost Zone Box is still probably going to see success. We've seen it with Mew VMAX, we've seen it with a lot of other decks where it's just like, let's add Drapion to the format. Mew VMAX still conquers, let's add a grass type Pokemon to the format. Charizard still conquers, right? These counters only don't go so far, and not every single person is going to be playing them. Our strategy is going to be getting cards into the Lost Zone with Colress's Experiments, Comfey, and of course Lost Vacuum. We don't really gain anything new from this set, except we could maybe put a Night Stretcher. There might be some other attackers we could add in here, but we have the tried and true strategy, and our format's going to be very similar to what we had at Temporal Forces, so why really change up this deck too much? I think Lost Zone Box is really one of those strategies that's held the test of time. Since it first came out, it's been making those regionals wins all the way up to NAIC. Will the deck have its true victory at Worlds? We'll have to find out, but this is a great list to start off with. Sliding in with that icy hot fire at number 7 is going to be Chen-Pao EX. Now, Chen-Pao EX has been a long contender of one of the best decks in format, and here it is again at number 7. Since our format's very similar to the Temporal Forces metagame that we saw at the North American International Championships, Chen-Pao EX was kind of given some disregard towards that tournament, and a handful of top players played it to pretty decent success. Our format's kind of grown similar to where Chen-Pao was the best deck in format before that. If we're looking towards our Twilight Masquerade format, where we had Charizard and we had Dragapult and stuff like that. Like, I always get Temporal and Twilight mixed up, but you know what I'm saying? If Charizard and Dragapult are at the top of the metagame, Chen-Pao is doing well. It also does well against Gardevoir. It also does well against a bunch of other things. So what I'm trying to say is Chen-Pao is pretty decently well positioned, and maybe I'm letting out too much news for some other decks that might be on this list, but Chen-Pao seems pretty good into the metagame right now. Gaining Pheasantipity EX so they could draw 3 cards if one of your Pokemon was knocked out. And of course, we have the strategy of loading up energies with Baxcalibur, attacking with Chen-Pao, attacking with Iron Hands, and now we can even attack with Pheasantipity if it does anything good for us. We added a Night Stretcher as well here, allowing us to get back some of our key pieces, and just really making this deck the best form of the deck we've possibly ever had. So if your opponent knocks out a Bibarel, we have that Pheasantipity strategy that's kind of like the popsicle stick and glue that's holding this deck together. Pheasantipity can hold down a household for a couple turns, right? And whether it's the first turn of the game, after one of your Pokemon was knocked out, or if it's been out there for a few turns, as long as it doesn't end up becoming a huge prize card liability, it's absolutely going to be dominating by drawing some cards throughout the entire game. I think Chen-Pao is one of those decks where when you know what you're doing with Chen-Pao, you probably want to be playing Chen-Pao. Give this deck a try. It's absolutely sick into our Worlds format. Flying high at number 6 is going to be Lugia VSTAR. Now, Lugia VSTAR, we're going to go with the Chinchino version instead of the kind of basic build that Alex Szymanski piloted to a top 32 at NAIC. Why? Well, we're kind of dealing with a lot more Stage 2 decks towards the top of this list. I'm sure you could take your best guesses at what they are, and if you want to help out the YouTube algorithm, be sure to let us know in the comments below if you think decks like Charizard or Dragapult or Gardevoir or any other Stage 2 might make this list. Cough, cough, they might be on this list. Lugia VSTAR is going to be able to summon out those Archeops. Archeops is going to load up energies to your various Pokemon, but in this case, we're going to be powering up Chinchino, so we're able to use Special Roll to knock out these Pokemon. Since we want to have that kind of semi-finite or potential to kind of get that extra claw into our opponent, scaling up as their HP grows up, Chinchino is typically better against Pokemon like that. And that's why we have more Chinchino and Minchino than some other typical lists. A lot of decks are even going to a 2-2 line in our current format, but in Shrouded Fable, I think the whole 4-3 line, or in this case a 3-1-3 line, is a little bit more better. Going with the 70 HP Minccino, something I haven't necessarily mentioned in this video so far, is because Dragapult and Dusknoir and other spread tactics are kind of out there, kind of doing pretty good things up in the world, so having the little bit of extra HP, especially when it comes to our Minccinos, our Beldums, our Frigibax, our Charmanders, you can go on and on with the list. Maybe grab those out of the back of the shoebox, grab them, they're probably worthwhile, and if you don't have them, pick them up from Kayfabe. Right now we have a decent bit of text for the deck, have a pretty consistent base here, and Jamming Tower is still helpful in a world where Gardevoir is helpful and other lists are playing some charms, bravery charms to get around Duskull and Dusclops and stuff like that. So Gardevoir is definitely one of the big pieces for Jamming Tower, but there are a few other uses. Right now, I think that Lugia seems like it's pretty well positioned. It's one of those things where if you're not playing Lugia, maybe play a few games against Lugia, because it's around, it's here. We got the list that's figured out for the most part, and it seems pretty good if you ask me. Slipping into number 5, and all that talk about Gardevoir really coming up here is Gardevoir itself. Now, Gardevoir is really one of those menaces of the format where if it's not the top deck, it's got to be one of the top decks. One of the reasons why Gardevoir has been kicked down the list a little bit is due to not really getting a whole lot from the sets. I mean, we gained Night Stretcher, but if we look towards it, we're not really adding anything new. And I think it's the same way for our Lugia list, where it's like Lugia is not moving up the list because it didn't get anything new. We want to experiment with these new cards, and as the metagame kind of shapes up around it, maybe we'll see a few other things get added in here and some new techs. I mean, there's the opportunity to add in Klefki, we could add in Mimikyu, like there's a handful of things, but right now Gardevoir is looking very similar to the list that saw success at the North American International Championships. Gardevoir is all about using its Kirlia to draw cards, Monkey Dory to take damage counters off of your Pokemon that you use with Psychic Embraces from Gardevoir. Gardevoir is loading up those energies, adding damage counters. Monkey Dory can move those damage counters to your opponent's Pokemon, so of course you have ways to manipulate damage on your board, and of course the damage on your Pokemon to make sure that you're getting the right amount to get knockouts on your opponent's Pokemon when it comes to things like Screamtail and with Drifloon. We also have Cresselia in there for good measure, so we can take damage counters off all of our Pokemon and move them onto our opponent's Pokemon. Our build is going to be pretty standard across the board. I think Gardevoir is really one of those tried and true decks. If you're a Gardevoir player, Gardevoir might be the play for you for Worlds. However, when it comes down to some of these other decks in formats, getting addition of Dusknoir, Dusclops, Duskull, Gardevoir might not necessarily be as good as it was being the #1 deck in our Twilight Masquerade formats. Gardevoir is looking like it's kind of middle of the road right now. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, it's not necessarily getting countered, but it could end up being a choice where it's not necessarily beating the rest of the decks as much as is possible. Again, truly, I think this deck is middle of the road right now, but if you're a Gardevoir fan and if you have a strategy against some of these Dusknoir decks and Lost Vacuums and ways that Charizard and Dragapult and other decks might take a 3 prize card turn against you, let me know. Would love to hear about it in the comments and spark a friendly discussion. I do get back to every single comment eventually, as long as it's productive. If you're just going to be a meanie on there, I'm probably going to delete the comment. Other than that, it's one of those things where if it's a productive conversation, even if it's the good, the bad, the ugly, 100% I will get into it. That being said, we're about to enter our top 4. If you haven't put your best guesses in the comments below, let us know what you think the top 4 best decks are in the Shrouded Fable formats. Causing all the rage at number 4 is going to be Raging Bull EX. Yes, I know my puns are terrible. Trust me, I'm about to become a Pokedad. I gotta get used to this stuff where I'm not gonna be as funny as I used to be. My bad. Anyways, Raging Bull EX is really one of those decks where you're trying to do 70 damage per each energy you're pitching off. How are you getting those energies in play? Well, we got Teal Mask Ogerpon EX and Professor Sada's Vitality. That's enough ways for us to get the energies in play, and we have this very aggressive, abrasive deck where you're just kind of running through big HP basic Pokemon that's knocking things out, and maybe you're gonna get a Pokemon catcher or a Prime catcher out to knock out the Pokemon your opponent doesn't want you to knock out. This strategy works, and of course, with Teal Mask Ogerpon being grass type, you do have some type advantage in this metagame. We have single prize card attacker in the form of Sandy Shocks, And of course, we have ways to kind of get around most matchups. Pokemon Catcher is really going to be that glue that kind of holds this deck together. And of course, we've added Bravery Charm back into this archetype since you have to deal with Dusknoir, Dusclops, and Duskull, kind of really coming up with that strategy of doing more damage to your Pokemon than you ever expected before. That might just be the missing link when it comes to this deck. When your opponent's giving up prize cards, when you're one of the most aggressive decks in the format, there's a reason why this deck's at number 4. Maybe they have strategies against you, maybe they don't, but Raging Bolt right now seems like an incredible good play for the World Championships. And of course, when you have some of the top decks being stage 2 that might be a little slower, this deck might be able to outspeed them and have that kind of certain run at Worlds where you're just playing an aggressive deck, it's on the table, there's not really much to focus on except getting your strategy out. That being said, focus on your sequencing when it comes to this deck. Be sure to check it out and the rest of the list available in our pinned comment, especially if you want to playtest on any of the things such as Limitless Tabletop Simulator, or PvP, or anything else. Right now, this list is absolutely fantastic. Let me know what you think about it. Let's jump into our number 3 pick. The big Dragon Ball coming in at number 3 is going to be Regidrago VSTAR. Now, Regidrago VSTAR is really one of those decks that I was not expecting to be within the top 3, but this deck does gain Kyurem, and I think Kyurem is that super hot fire that everyone's coming down to. Now, Kyurem is going to be able to be copied by Regidrago VSTAR, and if our opponent played any kind of Colress, we can copy the attack for 1, but we still have to play the attack of Regidrago anyways. So in this case, if we have Kyurem in our discard pile at any point, Regidrago can use its attack, Apex Dragon, and copy Kyurem, pitch all energies from Regidrago and go 110, 110, 110. That's enough in the early game if our opponent doesn't get a mana fee to wipe an entire board. Or it's enough in the late game for us to go canceling Cologne, Kyurem, 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 win the game. Between that, Dragapult EX, and a few other cards that we have in this deck, there's some really cool strategies that we can pull off. And of course, you might be like, why do you play Tina VSTAR, Zach? That's one of the questions, like, why did I choose my attackers? Well, I went with Tina VSTAR because we have the opportunity to do 280 damage, which is enough to knock out a Regidrago VSTAR. Tina V is a card that I've added in here because there have been a few cards like Cornerstone Mask, Ogre Pawn, Mimikyu, things that we just need to shred through to get the knockout to do 160. Now you might be like, yo, Mew EX can copy Mimikyu by placing damage counters on Mimikyu. Well, I've run into the situation where some Mimikyu lists, especially in Pidgeot controls, have played a couple copies of Mist Energy, so that doesn't necessarily work. One card that I probably need to add in here is Hawlucha, because more and more that I think about it and see in Japanese lists, going Dragapult, knocking out a 60 HP Pokemon, or now a 70 HP Pokemon with Hawlucha could be very cool. But other than that, I've had a lot of success in the metagame with this deck. So if you're looking for a kind of fun, fresh, new way to play Raging Bolts, or copying a bunch of different attacks because you missed Mewtwo and Mew GX, we have Mewtwo and Mew GX at home, right? We have ways to copy different attacks from our discarded Pokemon and really giving us that kind of Swiss Army knife kind of style of deck that can be quite successful. We're about to enter into the top 2. I know I've been hyping this up a little bit, but what do you think the top 2 decks in the format are? I think it's pretty exciting to see where they're at, what might be new about them, and really seeing what's going on with their metagame. Again, best guesses in the comments below. You could bring it to my Discord server that's also in the description if you want to spark a discussion a little bit more over there. But let's jump into that number 2 pick. Being an absolute menace at number 2 and being paired with Pidgeot EX is going to be Dragapult EX. Now in this case, we're going to be using Phantom Dive to do damage counters to our opponent's bench Pokemon while doing a consistent 200 damage. The new cards that we basically added into this list are going to be Dusknoir, Dusclops, and Duskull. Now you might have heard me talk about them a few times, and you might be like, huh, it's kind of weird that I'm only seeing it at number 2. Well, just you wait, this is kind of the new metagame. And as I'm looking at this list, maybe I even want to have a second Duskull, so we're able to set up some more Dusclops and Dusknoir plays. Dusclops allows you to pop the Dusclops, meaning your opponent draws a prize card, Dusclops is knocked out, put 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's its ability. Your opponent gets to draw a prize card, but that might allow you to draw a multi-prize card turn with Dragapult hitting the active for extra damage or the bench for extra damage and spreading that damage to make it go even further. Dusknoir takes that a step further, that if you pop it, it's the same ability, except you're doing 13 damage counters to one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's enough for you to knock out a Charizard EX in the active, or another Pokemon that's a stage 2 Pokemon EX in most cases. We can now also activate things like Iono so our opponent draws less, Roxanne when our opponent gets them to 3 or less prize cards, and of course we kind of have our own kind of strategy with this deck by using Pokemon Technical Machine De-Evolution to kind of draw multiple prize cards, set our opponent back. We have a whole bunch of cool things that we could be doing with this deck. I think Dragapult is really a true damage spread deck that we have in this format. Maybe it's maybe it needs a little bit of tweaking. I think that Dragapult lists are still brand new compared to a lot of the other lists that we've had. I mean, they've only been out for a few short months, at least in North America. So if you think this is the Dragapult list for you, let me know. If there's any changes you make, let me know. Otherwise, let's jump into our best deck heading into Worlds. The best deck in the Shrouded Fable format is Charizard EX with Pidgeot, also with Dusknoir. Now we see how this Dusknoir's strategy is going to be working, and I think it works particularly well with Charizard EX. Not only can we place damage counters on our opponent's Pokemon to maybe knock out something on their bench, knock out something that we originally hit with Burning Darkness, or we can hit the active so we can kind of scale our damage. We also scale our damage with Charizard EX. By Burning Darkness, our opponent draws a prize card. We can set it up a little bit higher. So no longer can our opponent play around, oh, Burning Darkness can only do this much damage. We can set it up to a point where Burning Darkness can do a lot of damage, and we can do a lot more damage, and we can force damage going a little bit further. You can see we do have the second Duskull that we have in this deck. Again, shout out to my friend Nora. She really came up with a great strategy there that really taught me how to kind of build some of the decks in this format. And we have Pheasantipity in this deck as well, so we can draw some cards instead of going with the whole Babero line, giving us a kind of that in-between mix. Of course, we can also use Pheasantipity to snipe our opponent's bench if we don't have that boss's orders, opening up a whole realm of attacks that we have here, of course, powering it up with Charizard EX. Pidgeot EX can kind of search for any of the cards that we're missing in between, and we have those cards like Iono and Roxanne that we can activate with Dusknoir, Dusclops. We have Maximum Belt here. One thing that I have that's kind of that other people don't have is the Maximum Belt, causing us to do an additional 50 damage to our opponent's Pokemon, really scaling up damage quicker with Dusknoir and Dusclops than our opponent probably could ever imagine. So we can kind of get to those points quickly where they think they're safe, they're not safe, and we're just going to use Iono or Roxanne against our opponents. Also, Technical Machine De-Evolution, with a lot of these decks focusing on these triple stage 2 lines we saw in the past 2 decks of the Charizard and the Dragapult. Technical Machine De-Evolution might just mean that our opponent runs out of rare candy mid-game, and of course with all this spreading potential, we have the opportunity to draw multiple prize cards at once. Rest of the build is kind of discovered off of Charizard builds that have just been seeing success for the entirety of time. So as we kind of look through all of this, I think Charizard EX is just a fantastic choice going into Worlds. It's probably the most proven archetype that we've seen this season, and it gains the most from Shrouded Fable and the whole Dusknoir, Dusclops, Duskull, Pheasantipity, all that kind of good stuff. Is this the best list for it? I'm pretty close. I think it's probably about 58 out of 60 cards, if not more, for being close to perfect for Worlds. Let me know what you think, but right now I think Charizard is the best deck in our Shrouded Fable formats. Well, that's what we got going on for our list today. Hopefully you enjoyed learning a little bit more about what we got about Shrouded Fable. Really appreciate everyone for tuning in, seeing this video out, and of course, hearing me out. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for any of y'all. Thanks for letting me yap into the void, and hopefully you've been enjoying a few of the upgrades. I've been working with my lighting. I got my adjustable light up here. I've been working on my audio, and beyond me getting a bit of a bad back pain during my move, feeling a little bit better today. Keynote to anyone, don't be in the 30 plus club and try to pick up a 60-pound dog. That's really where it's at. Everything else is going great. I'm preparing for Worlds. I'm going to start playing some challenges and some cups in Montreal this week, hopefully. And I'm really excited. I have all my decks built in the Shrouded Fable format. Again, if you're trying to pick up any of those cards, get ready for Worlds. Pick them up from Kayfabe. We got the Shuffle Squad website with some singles now. If you haven't checked out our new website, be sure to check it out. And of course, we have PTCGL store if you're trying to pick up these cards for online. Myself, I'm going to shamelessly plug all of our sponsors here. We got the Advanced GG, the energy drink powder supplement kind of thing. It might not be the right product for everyone, but I think it's the right product for me. And if there was any other product that I'd want to be sponsored by, shout out Tums for helping me out here. As an old dude, or starting to be old dude, Tums are pretty fantastic. But other than that, I do love my advanced GG. It's been giving me the energy to create this content, really kind of go through. And of course, our sponsors over at Ultimate Guard, protecting their decks. You can see I always have a very solid deck on my list, or on my a very solid deck on my desk. And the list that we're going here is my Charizard in Shrouded Fable format. I'm just printing off proxies and all that. Shout out for Pokeca Book for kind of coming up with the metagame in Japan. I've definitely followed pretty closely towards that. Of course, going with my own direction on lists, but feel free to spark a discussion in my Discord server. That's also brand new. You can check that in the description if you want to kind of go over and see what's going on over there. I know I'm just kind of rambling on at this point. Hopefully everyone's having a good middle of their week. I will catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.